Recently, I reviewed this shoe, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4, very enthusiastically. I'm a big fan of this shoe. If you missed that review, there'll be a link in the description to that full review for all the details on this shoe. But as I was planning the various Versus videos that would inevitably follow this shoe, I realized that this shoe compares to a broad range of shoes in the trainer space, all of which I've covered on this channel this year. And while I like to do my Versus videos one-on-one so I can really get into the details of comparing those two shoes, I realized that's not really going to work for this shoe because this shoe compares to so many different shoes. And when you're comparing this shoe to a lot of those shoes, it makes sense to be able to compare them to a third or fourth shoe in some cases. So it made sense to do a Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus everybody video. And if you stick around at the end, there'll be one of the biggest performance matrices I have done to date on this channel. And starting here, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the Nike Pegasus 41. Now, I don't typically like to compare an older shoe with a newer shoe. The Peg 41 is from 2024, a full generation behind the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. However, the Peg 41, or just the Pegasus platform, really is the baseline for the standard boring daily trainer archetype. It's just the baseline that every other shoe needs to be judged against. It just works for everyone, for really everything, across from a new runner to an elite level runner. It's just that good of a basic daily trainer. And for multiple generations, it feels like Puma has really been gearing the Velocity to be Puma's version of a Pegasus. And with the Velocity Nitro 4, it really feels like they finally nailed it and really made a Puma Pegasus, if you will. So if you look at the specs of these two shoes, you'll see that they're fairly similar as far as stack height, drop, the feel of the drop. The biggest differences you're going to run into are weight. The Velocity Nitro 4 is considerably lighter, and the foam. The foam in the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is the new ATPU Nitro foam tuned for training. It's tuned more for comfort and cushion, and it just gives you a much more dynamic but cushioned ride. So the ride profile for the Velocity Nitro 4 is resilient. The ride profile for the Peg 41 is cushioned. And looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, as you can see, they are fairly similar. I will say the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is a little bit narrower, especially in the forefoot, and because the foam is more flexible, it gives you a much more neutral ride. There's more heel flaring on the medial and lateral side in the Peg. The Peg, while it is still a neutral shoe, just has a little bit more stability in it. The React X foam that's in that shoe also makes that shoe ride a little bit more absorbent. So the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is a much more neutral shoe, and it's a much more nimble shoe. And you really do feel that on foot, a combination of the foam and the overall geometry of these two shoes. So comparing these two shoes directly, I love both of these. If you watch this channel, you know I'm a big fan of the Pegasus, but I'm going to say that it feels like Puma finally slightly bettered the Pegasus. This shoe does everything the Pegasus does, just a little bit better because of the foam in this shoe. The ATPU Nitro foam in this shoe is just more dynamic, more performance oriented, so it gives you much more performance in this shoe, much more than you would get in the Peg 41. However, this shoe still has that cushioned, protective ride that I would expect an all-around daily trainer, very much like the Pegasus 41. Though, if I'm just doing general running, not really training for anything, I just want a shoe that's going to let my foot flex, and it's just going to be a protective, absorbent shoe, I'm probably still going to opt for the Peg 41 because I like React X and I like how much more dense this foam feels underfoot for that general type of running. But if I'm planning and training and doing a build for really anything, I'm probably going to reach for the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 because the ATPU Nitro foam in the shoe is just that much more dynamic, but it still gives me enough cushion, enough absorption and protection that I can do all of my all-around daily running in. Both great shoes. I think Puma really has made their own version of the Pegasus in this generation, and I'm happy to see that. Moving on to the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the Nike Pegasus Plus, this is where comparing multiple shoes to the Velocity Nitro 4 in the same video really makes sense, because on paper, the Velocity Nitro 4 really is the brand's Peg 41. It's their entry-level base shoe daily trainer for their overall running line. From a performance standpoint, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 really compares directly with the Nike Pegasus Plus. As you can see from the specs, They're very similar. There's a little bit more foam in the Velocity Nitro 4. The drop is 10 mil in both, but I'm going to say the drop is a little bit more prominent in the Velocity Nitro 4. The weight is also very similar. The Velocity Nitro 4 is a tiny bit lighter, but you're never going to notice that. And from a ride profile standpoint, they're both nearly identical. Where the differences come in here, though, is the contact patch and outsole. One of my biggest criticisms of the Peg Plus is I just do not like the outsole. It works, I just think it could be better, and the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is that better outsole. It's a little bit more narrow, especially in the forefoot, and that makes a huge difference. The Velocity Nitro 4 just runs a little bit more nimble, a little bit more dynamic than the Peg Plus. The foams in these two shoes are very evenly matched. The performance in these two shoes are very evenly matched. But because of the geometry and the tooling of the outsole and the overall midsole of the Velocity Nitro 4, I think you just get a more natural, nimble ride. The Peg Plus, because it is so wide and flat, especially in the midfoot and forefoot, can feel a little slappy unless you're really up on your toes. And that problem does not exist in the Velocity Nitro 4 at all. So comparing these shoes side by side, I think fit-wise, both these shoes fit true to size for me. Both of them are a more narrow fit. I think the Velocity Nitro 4 is a little bit more narrow. But as far as performance, use case, where I would use these shoes, what I would reach for these shoes to go do on a run, it's exactly the same. The edge here, though, is, as I said, the tooling and the shape of the midsole and the outsole in the Velocity Nitro 4. It's just a little bit more natural, a little bit more nimble. It doesn't have the slappy, flat feeling that the Peg Plus can have. But I would reach for either one of these shoes to do the exact same thing. I think at the present moment, in the end of summer 2025, I'll probably reach more for the Velocity Nitro 4 because I've spent a lot of time already in this shoe, which is from 2024. And right now, this one I think is just a little bit more dynamic than this wonderful shoe. Moving on to the next comparison, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the Asics Novablast 5. My top two all-around daily trainer recommendations for 2025. Both these shoes are do-it-all, go anywhere, a shoe that should make really any runner happy. From a spec standpoint, the Novablast 5 has much more foam in it. You do feel like you're on substantially more foam. The drop in the shoe is a true 8 mil in the Novablast 5. It feels a little bit lower than the Velocity Nitro 4. From a weight standpoint, they're similar enough that you're never going to notice the difference between these two shoes. And from a ride profile standpoint, you have a resilient ride in the Velocity Nitro 4 versus a springy ride in the Novablast 5. The primary differences come in the outsole and contact patch. The Velocity Nitro 4 is just a much more narrow, much more nimble shoe, much more suited to my preferences. I also think the outsole in the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is a much better outsole. I've had no issues with the Novablast 5 outsole. I've had no issues with durability or grip. I think it's probably the best execution of a blast outsole in the Novablast 5 that Asics has done to date. But the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 outsole is just that much better. You can bring it on road, trail, gravel, dirt, technical trail, really anything, and you're going to be totally fine. I definitely prefer the contact patch, the geometry, the width, and how nimble the Velocity Nitro 4 is over the Novablast 5. And comparing these two shoes side by side, as I said, they are both exceptional all-around daily trainers. Again, my top two recommendations for 2025 to date, as of the end of summer 2025. If you're a runner who wants a little bit more shoe, more cushion, a more substantial upper, a little bit more stability, that's definitely the Novablast 5 from Asics. Also, from a fit standpoint, both of these are true to size. So I'm going to say the Novablast 5 is a little bit longer to me, but both of these are great fits. If you want something that's more nimble and you like something that's a little bit more direct and a little bit more responsive, that's the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. I do think the foam in the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is the better foam. I've never loved FF Blast, even though FF Blast Max, which is in the Novablast 5, is a very good foam. I just greatly prefer the ATPU Nitro foam that's in the Velocity Nitro 4. If I am looking for a shoe just to do general running and I want something that's got some stability, that's the Novablast 5. If I want a shoe that's going to do all of that, plus I can do a lot of training, a lot of speed work, a lot of tempo work, that's going to be the Velocity Nitro 4. This is also a much more neutral shoe with very little stability in it, so consider that when you're trying to pick between these two shoes. The Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2. The top two all-around daily trainers that have a lot of performance in them that I reviewed to date at the end of the summer of 2025. The Velocity Nitro 4 has much more foam in it, though it doesn't feel that much different. There is more foam in that shoe. The drop in the Velocity Nitro 4 is much more prominent. The drop in the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 is 6 mil. Feels a little bit lower than that because the foam is so compressive. From a weight standpoint, the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 is the lighter shoe, but both of these are very lightweight shoes for a daily trainer. And from a ride profile standpoint, the resilient ride of the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the lively ride of the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 is kind of the same way of talking about similar performance characteristics, but really just giving an accent to how the foam behaves. The foam in the Velocity Nitro 4 is the firmer foam. The foam in the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 is one that you sink into a little bit more, but the resilience of both these foams is really off the charts, and it's all you would need for overall daily training, but also performance running as well. Looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, this is where there is a massive difference. The Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 is the only shoe in this list that has a CPU outsole, which is fantastic. Amazing grip, amazing durability. It just works everywhere, still gives you a really great ground feel. I love both of these outsoles. The geometry and width of the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 is also a bit wider. There's much more material in the midfoot and the heel, giving you more stability in the shoe, especially in the midfoot. You do notice that. And the forefoot is wider. Overall, while the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 is the softer shoe, it is the more stable shoe between these two shoes, though they're both very neutral, they're both very nimble. And comparing these two shoes side by side, these are two shoes that really tick all the boxes for a daily trainer. You can go from an easy jog all the way up to a hard workout in either one of these shoes. And even though I reviewed the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 very favorably, I absolutely adore this shoe. Given the sad news of Atreyu shutting down, that's why I'm not covering this shoe that closely right now, because this shoe has gone into the archive. This is a very, very special shoe, probably the last Atreyu we're going to see, so I want to keep this shoe in very good condition. But if you are trying to decide between these two shoes, you can't go wrong with either one of these. If you like a slightly lower to the ground, softer, more sink in feel that has a little bit more stability, go the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2. If you like something that's got a little bit more pop off the toe, that's a little bit more nimble and much more neutral, meaning there's no stability at all in the midfoot or the heel of the shoe, go for the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. But you can do all of the same things in both these shoes. They tick all of the same boxes, and you're going to be very happy with either one of them. Moving on to the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the New Balance Rebel V5. This is probably my most unexpected versus of the year because I didn't expect to actually be covering either one of these shoes, let alone enjoying them as much as I do, both of them. The New Balance Rebel V5 is the bigger shoe. There's more foam in that shoe. There's a lower drop in that shoe. It's the lighter weight shoe. Technically, the Rebel V5 is a performance trainer, not really a daily trainer, though I think New Balance is gearing it more towards being the daily trainer of the sort of New Balance lineup, which is why I feel pretty good about comparing these two shoes, because they both do the same things and they do it very well. The ride profile of both these shoes is a very resilient poppy ride in the Velocity Nitro 4 versus a very soft but resilient enough ride with the fuel cell foam in the Rebel V5. And moving to the outsole and contact pouch of these two shoes, you can see that the New Balance Rebel V5 is just much more shoe, especially in the midfoot and the heel, though that doesn't really equate to much more stability because the foam in the New Balance Rebel V5 is so much softer. The Puma Velocity Nitro 4 feels very nimble and actually feels very traditional compared to the New Balance Rebel V5, and I think both the outsoles are very good. I gave a lot of the credit for the performance and the feel of the Rebel V5 to this wonderful change in the outsole. That big 4-foot piece of rubber really makes a difference in how that shoe actually runs. But overall, I think if you're looking for a daily trainer that can kind of do everything and is going to be very durable, you can't beat the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 in this versus. And comparing these two shoes side by side, this shoe was a big surprise to me, given the range of this shoe. Technically, as I said, this is a performance trainer. It's made more for threshold into tempo running. However, this is a shoe that's very comfortable, very competent for easy running, from a jog into easy, into steady running before you get into threshold and tempo. This shoe does that really well. And when you want to pick it up and really push it into higher tempo paces, this shoe also does it really well. I think the geometry of this shoe is toned down from some other performance trainers in this space, one of which I'll be talking about in this video. And I think the fuel cell foam in this shoe has enough resilience that it works when you really need to step on it and pick up the pace, but it's also comfortable and cushioned enough for overall sort of general easy running. That being said, this is a daily trainer. It's not really meant to be a performance trainer, but this shoe, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4, will do everything the Rebel V5 does, but I think in a better shoe that's more nimble and more neutral. I've run into a bit of a problem with the Rebel V5. I made a whole video about that. I'll put a link in the description to that, where the combination of the super soft foam, the very low drop, and the very wide heel and midfoot in this shoe give my Achilles just endless pain. I really love this shoe, but this shoe does not love me. Therefore, everything I would want this shoe for, I'm going to reach for this shoe. And the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is just going to do everything that the Rebel V5 can do, but just do it a little bit better. There's going to be less sink in this shoe. You're going to have a much more poppy, more direct ride in the shoe. Even though there's a lower stack in the Velocity Nitro 4, it doesn't feel substantially lower. I did credit the Rebel V5 as a great shoe to transition from only running in max cushion shoes to getting into lower stack shoes. This is a good kind of middle ground between those two shoes. This is probably that lower stack shoe that you may want to be running in a lot, but this is a shoe that you're probably going to use to transition from the max cushion shoes into a shoe like this. You can't go wrong with either one of these shoes. I think they both have wonderful fits, though the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 has a much more traditional trainer-like fit. This is a very New Balance in 2024-2025 fit. It's very wide, it's very loose. I think I prefer the fit of this shoe. True to size in both of these, I think the length is there. But if you like a tighter, more traditional fit, Puma Velocity Nitro 4, if you like that looser, more room in the forefoot for your toes to splay, and you like that New Balance fit, then obviously you're going to like the Rebel V5. The Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the Adidas Evo SL. This is the versus that a lot of people in my comments have been asking for. On paper, these are very, very different shoes. The stack heights are very different, the drops are very different. The weights are similar, though I will say the Evo SL does feel lighter, and the geometry is extremely different. The Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is a very traditional geometry, which I think makes it a much better all-around daily trainer, where the Evo SL has a much more aggressive, modern, early stage rocker geometry coming from the Evo 1, the super shoe that Adidas released a couple years ago, which makes it a better true performance trainer, not really great for easy running. And I've talked a lot about that on this channel. From a ride profile standpoint, surprisingly, these two shoes are very similar. The resilient ride of the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the springy ride of the Evo SL. I will say that the Evo SL is a shoe that rolls you forward, and if you like a bouncier shoe, that's why I labeled the ride profile springy. You want the Evo SL. If you like a more traditional shoe that allows you to run how you want to run, but you're still going to get all of the performance of the Evo SL, that's the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. And looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, I was actually very surprised to see that the dimensions of these two shoes in the midfoot and heel are actually very similar. They do not feel like that on foot. The forefoot of the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is much more narrow, and you do notice that. The Velocity Nitro 4 is a much more nimble shoe on foot than the Evo SL. However, the Evo SL is a shoe that has that big piece of continental rubber in the forefoot that gives you a big place to land, and you're getting a lot of bounce in that shoe. That's why that shoe is such a huge hit this year, is because it's just a fun, bouncy shoe to run in that works pretty well for a lot of people, though unfortunately not for me because of the fit. From a stability standpoint, both these shoes are very neutral, though I will say the Evo SL for an Adidas Adizero shoe probably is your best bet if you have any pronation issues, though it's still not going to be the best option out there. Whereas in the Puma Velocity Nitro 4, that is a very neutral shoe, so if you have any pronation, I would just forget that the Velocity Nitro 4 exists. From a rubber and outsole standpoint, the Velocity Nitro 4 just has a much better all-around outsole that you can really bring anywhere, where I think the Evo SL has a much more focused road outsole and it works wonderfully on the road, but not really anywhere else. In comparing these shoes side by side, I'm going to say that when I got the Evo SL earlier this year, what I wanted this shoe to fit like is exactly how the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 fits. This shoe just has a much more dialed, tuned upper and fit and last overall that just makes this shoe fit so much better. One of the biggest problems, or probably the biggest problem with this shoe, besides the marketing, which is silly on this shoe, is the fit of the shoe. It's just too wide, too much of a mess in the forefoot, and it really takes away a lot personally for me in this shoe. For me, this is a much better dedicated performance trainer. If you're going out for 6-7K of tempo running, that's probably all I can really do in this shoe because the fit beyond that just doesn't work for me. It really beats up my toes and really beats up the front of my foot because the casual fit that's in this shoe just does not work. But from a performance standpoint, both these shoes, I would say, do the exact same thing. They do it extremely, extremely well. This is probably the more dynamic, more, I would say, modern take on performance running in a non-plated all-around performance trainer. You can't beat this shoe. There's a reason this is probably going to be the most popular shoe of the year in 2025. This is a shoe that a lot of people, if you can get past the fit, just have a lot of fun in. The Puma Velocity Nitro 4, though, does everything the Evo SL does, but in a better fit, in a more traditional geometry. This is a shoe that lets you dictate how you're going to run. You don't always have to be rolling forward and bouncing in a very performance way. The Evo SL is just a shoe that is not very good for casual or easy running. And I think when you get up to real high-end tempo running, this shoe also falls down because it's just too aggressive in the geometry and there's just too much bouncy foam in the shoe. This shoe is a much more traditional take with a very performance foam that I would say is on par with Lightstrike Pro Classic that's in the Evo SL, but in a traditional geometry with a better fit. It's hard not to pick this shoe for me for anything that I would want this shoe for. I think I would always pick the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. Though I will say, if you love the Evo SL but you want a more traditional daily trainer to pair with it, that's probably this shoe. This shoe is going to give you a lot of the performance and the feel, and you'll be able to do all your easy and casual running in this shoe, and then save this shoe for performance running, whether that's training or even racing. This makes a very good two-shoe rotation, and I think these two shoes, while they do go head-to-head, I think they complement each other very well because of the geometry and the fit. The Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the Adidas Supernova Rise 2. This is another comparison that I've been getting asked a lot about in the comments around my Puma Velocity Nitro 4 video. And at first, it's not one that I really thought to do a comparison on because it didn't really make sense to me. Though the more I thought about it, the more I realized that these are two all-around sort of entry-level daily trainers. But from a stack height standpoint, there is a little bit more foam in the Velocity Nitro 4. The drop is 10 mil in both of these, and I would say the real feel is 8 to 10. I would say the drop in these two shoes actually feels very similar, though the Supernova Rise 2 from Adidas is a little bit softer, so you do sink into that a little bit more. The weight between these two shoes is noticeably different. The Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is the lighter option, but the Adidas Supernova Rise 2 is more built for comfort and cruising, so there's a little bit more cushion and padding overall on that shoe, which adds to the weight, and that really dictates the ride profiles of these two shoes. The very resilient, very neutral, very poppy ride of the Puma Velocity Nitro 4, and that very plush ride that's very comfortable of the Supernova Rise 2 from Adidas. Looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, from a dimension standpoint, they're actually a little bit more similar than I expected them to be, though the Adidas Supernova Rise 2 just has more material in the midfoot and the heel. Even though the dimension is the same width in the heel, because of that wider midfoot, you really do notice the more structured Supernova Rise 2. Again, that shoe's built for comfort and cruising more than anything else. Outsole material wise, I love both of these, though I think the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is just the better all-around outsole. I think the Supernova Rise 2 outsole is a great road outsole. You can do some dirt roads, some light gravel on that, but I wouldn't do anything more than that. Whereas in the Puma Velocity Nitro 4, I would bring that shoe literally anywhere because I know it's going to grip and I know it's going to be very durable and give me a lot of feel. And comparing these two shoes head to head, I'm going to say this. If you are just doing general running and you want a more cruisy, comfortable shoe just to go cruising, and that's what you prioritize in a daily trainer, that's the Adidas Supernova Rise 2. If you want a shoe that can do all of that, but has more performance in it, that's the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. From a fit standpoint, these are both true to size for me, though I'm going to say the Supernova Rise 2 is a little bit longer, a little bit more pointy, though I would still say true to size in this shoe. The Puma Velocity Nitro 4 has a tighter, more aggressive fit. It's a little bit narrower as well. I prefer this type of fit, but both of these are very comfortable all-around daily trainers. There is more performance in this shoe. There is more pop off the toe in this shoe. I think the ATPU Nitro foam that's in this shoe is the better, more performance-oriented foam, though it's still definitely tuned for cushion and comfort. Whereas the Dreamstrike Plus foam in the shoe with the EVA support rods in this shoe and all the tech that's in the midsole of the shoe just make this a better, more stable cruiser for more people. I think you could pair these two shoes together. This is your cruiser for easy and recovery runs. This is your overall sort of day-to-day daily trainer. Though again, anything you can do in this shoe, I think you can do in this shoe, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. But again, if you want to prioritize comfort and cruising, Adidas Supernova Rise 2. And ending on the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 versus the Adidas Adizero SL2. This was another request that I got a lot in the comments of my review for the Velocity Nitro 4. Stack height and geometry of these two shoes is actually very similar. The drop is also more similar than it actually looks here in the specs. I will say, depending on how you strike the ground in the Adidas Adizero SL2, that shoe can feel closer to 8 mil, though if you're a heavy heel or midfoot striker, that can feel a little bit lower. And from a weight standpoint, they're actually pretty close. The real difference comes in the ride profile. Again, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is very resilient, very poppy, very dynamic off the toe, where I just never got that with the Adidas Adizero SL2. It's just a very neutral shoe to me, and I mean that in just the ride profile. Wasn't super resilient, but also wasn't totally dead underfoot. It just was a good middle ground across the board. It's a shoe that often lost out for me because I often reached for more interesting shoes or different trainers overall. I didn't spend a lot of time in the Adizero SL2 last year, but it's a great shoe. And I do think if you race in the Adios Pro 3 still, the Adizero SL2 is your best bet as a trainer. But unless you're racing the Adios Pro 3 still, I think there's much better options out there, mainly the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. And looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, dimension-wise, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 just feels more nimble, more neutral, where the Adidas Adizero SL2 just feels more flat and more rolling. I think that's great for an Adizero trainer, especially if you're racing in Adizero shoes, but for overall general running, I think the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is just a better shoe. Honestly, I think from an outsole standpoint, the Puma grip on the Velocity Nitro 4 is obviously the better material here. The Adiwear rubber that's on the SL2 is very good, was very durable, but it's also very road focused. I wouldn't bring this shoe on anything beyond a dirt or gravel road, definitely never on trails, and it didn't actually work very well for me on track, but the Velocity Nitro 4 is one that you can bring literally anywhere and it's going to perform. And comparing these two shoes side by side, unfortunately, I no longer have my pair of SL2s. They were donated a long time ago. That's how little I actually ran in that shoe overall. I'm going to say that the SL2 is the best bet if you want to run in a full Adidas rotation, or as I said, you're still racing in the Adios Pro 3. The SL2 is your shoe. However, if you're racing in the Adios Pro 4 or the Evo 1 or Evo 2, or not racing in a Adizero shoe, I think the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is the better option. Between the SL2, which you can imagine right here, and the Puma Velocity Nitro 4, I think the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is a shoe that's just much more traditional. I think this has a lot more versatility. It's definitely more neutral, and I think the foam in this, the ATPU Nitro foam, is just much more dynamic. It's kind of what I wanted the SL2 to feel like, but just never did. I would definitely pick the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 any day between these two shoes. And moving to my performance matrix, if we take all 9 of these shoes and put them on here, this is what we get. We see that these are definitely trainers, and they cover a lot of ground. In fact, we have 3 shoes on here, mainly the Velocity Nitro 4 from Puma, the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2, and the Rebel V5 from New Balance that really tick all the boxes. They go end to end and cover everything in this range. But I'm going to say this. Of those 3 shoes, the Velocity Nitro 4 I think is the best bet. I think a lot of people are going to be caught off guard by how soft the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2 actually is. If you don't like a soft shoe, you're not going to really like that shoe. Plus, again, given the state of Atreyu shutting down and the Daily Trainer 2 being sort of a rare shoe as the weeks and months go by, it's not a shoe that a lot of people are going to be able to find or want to dive into. All the performance that was in the Daily Trainer 2, which is exceptional, you can find in the Velocity Nitro 4. The Rebel V5 was a shoe that I was surprised that could do the full range of running. However, because of the width and the softness of that shoe and just I think the overall durability, I do think the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 is the better end-to-end all-rounder. It's going to be more durable. I think you're going to get more response. I think more runners are going to benefit from it. And I think it's a shoe that probably is the better option, again, for end-to-end all-around daily trainer. Shoes like the Pegasus and the Pegasus Plus, I think they make sense. The Peg is more on the lower end. The Peg Plus is on the higher end. Again, the Velocity Nitro 4 sort of covers both of those shoes, and it covers it very well. As far as the Novablast, I think surprisingly the Novablast can go into that max effort running. However, I'm still going to reach for the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 over the Novablast. I just prefer a smaller, more nimble, tighter fitting shoe. And that's definitely what the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 actually is. Looking at the Evo SL versus the Puma Velocity Nitro 4, I think the Evo SL is the better dedicated tempo trainer getting into performance running. You can do all of that in the Velocity Nitro 4, but the real sweet spot of the Evo SL is for that faster running, especially if the fit's there. And looking at the Supernova Rise 2 and the Adizero SL, I think those 2 shoes sit on the lower end. As I said, the Supernova Rise 2 from Adidas is more of a cruiser. The SL2 is a shoe that I think is better on the lower end. I know some people had success into threshold, maybe into max effort or tempo running. I just never did. I'm always going to reach for a shoe like the Puma Velocity Nitro 4 over either one of those shoes. As of the recording of this video, which is early August 2025, we are starting to enter into the fall release schedule for shoes coming out. And there are still some exciting trainers, whether they're daily trainers or performance trainers, yet to come. Probably the most anticipated one, at least for me, is the new Adidas Adizero trainer, whatever that shoe is that will replace the SL2. That should be a good one. I think Asics has a few options coming out. They're rethinking their line a little bit, and I think there'll be some surprises from some other brands. So as much as I love this shoe, the Puma Velocity Nitro 4, I think this is probably the best all-around trainer you can buy right now in 2025. There could be some other shoes coming out this fall that may knock this off, but it's going to be a hard thing to do because this shoe is very, very good. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, check out sagasurunning.com for merch or click the join button below. If neither one of those options are good for you, leave a comment, leave a like, because that helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.